but a lot of the builders are in this kind of range here. And what we found is to go to net zero, it makes economic sense to go very high lows. Insulation is not very expensive compared to a lot of other things, and so it makes sense for us.
What is the cost per R? Do you know?
Yeah, typically for attic insulation, it's around 3 cents per square foot per R value. So if you put R100 in a 1,000 square foot house, that would be $3,000 to put that amount of insulation in. And it's still one of the best bargains that you can do. What were the extra costs for these homes that we mentioned here? I kept fairly close track in my home, and we did a lot of things, like we built a rectangular house instead of a more complicated one. And the extra cost came in at around 7% more if we just built, compared to the standard home. The Factor 9 home, it had some extra things that related to Regina's soils. Regina has these expansive clay soils that push foundations around, so they went with a piling foundation, and they went with a brick as opposed to cheaper siding on the house. Let's go back to my house here. I did a calculation. If we put brick on the outside of our house instead of hardboard siding, the brick would have cost more than all of the energy efficiency features. So a lot of the choices that you make, in a home, do you want granite or concrete or laminate? These are kind of things and what's the cost effectiveness of putting granite in as opposed to laminate that look like granite? I don't know, you lose bragging rights, I guess. But 7% is not a lot, compared to the overall cost of construction these days. The Riverdale Net Zero, the extra cost came to about 35% for that. And the subsequent homes that Charles built, they've refined the design, and I think they cut the cost down more, like around 25% by optimizing. So that takes us to where we are right today and right here. And this is an artist's rendering of the home, and it's from the northeast here. And the house will be placed on a rural lot which has this sloping terrain there. And this picture was taken very recently here of the home under construction. Some of the renewable energy features, the solar electric panels are going right on here. The solar thermal panels, the flat plate collectors, will go right here between these windows. And then the evacuated tube collectors you can see here, they are in about half of the deck right here. You can see here there's an open crawl space right now. It's insulated just temporarily, but the house will be moved onto a foundation. Interestingly, to get from Vanscoy to Saskatoon, you have to go through Outlook. If you bring in a house in, and I think the reason was this could not fit underneath some of the underpasses between Vanscoy and here, so they had to take her down to Outlook. But if you look, there's a lot of homes being built in the city here now, up at J&H Lumber there in the north end. And if you can keep that height about 1 foot lower than this, you can move them around the city. I think as well, the truck that was moving these had a fairly high bed, and that was a reason why it was a little too high for the easier route.
These are 9-foot ceilings and you're 200.
That's correct, yeah, there's 9 foot
If it
ceiling.
was an 8-foot ceiling, you need to probably.
Yeah, probably put that one in, yeah. The house has a relatively flat roof here, but it's not a membrane type of roof. It's not an asphalt or a EPDM or so. Harold Loire once told me a great story. After the Second World War, there were quite a few homes that were built with flat roofs, and you see them around a lot around the university. They're miners' construction built. I have a friend who lives in one, and people were worried, well, don't these things leak? And so the roofing companies had this 20-year bonded roof. They had a guarantee for 20 years. But roofing companies often have no more capital behind them than their pickup truck that they use. And so the joke became over time, after they started leaking, that the warranty ran out when the water ran in. Now, this house doesn't have a membrane roof, it's got a metal roof actually, and a properly installed metal roof in our climate has, I'm sure, at least the life of a century. They often say farmers, the first roof they put on their house is asphalt shingles, and then over time, when they get a little more wherewithal, then they put a metal roof on it. I guess they can afford it.
Are the roof, is the roof trusses, engineered trusses?
Yes, yeah.
Oh, okay.
And here are the photovoltaic panels on the roof there. This system here is pretty expensive. I don't think they've tallied the final cost, but including all the hardware and that, it's roughly around $35,000 to $40,000, for that installation. And right now, it will pick up somewhere in the range of about 5,000 or 6,000 kilowatt hours a year, which would be at today's prices, that's around $660. So to put out, let's make the math easy. Let's say $35,000 investment, and you're getting $660 back a year. It's not going to shoot the lights out in terms of economic return. But one of the things is the price of these is falling quite remarkably. And I know we built a house in 1992, and a system that was about 1/3 this size cost $35,000. So we've had a factor of 3 improvement in cost this way. And the prospects for getting these down, I think, are there. And I have a friend in Ontario now who put in a system on his acreage. And in Ontario, you can get 80 cents a kilowatt hour now for generating photovoltaic power. And there's been just an explosion of activity in the rural areas now in Ontario. And on his investment of about $50,000, he's getting $8,000 a year in revenue. So now that's like a 16% rate of return with that.
Is that similar to the tax regime of Germany?
Yeah, they have guaranteed prices for 20 years and so on. And, so it's also, Ontario wants to be in on this, and one of the co-investors in this house, Bill Elliott, actually owns a company in Ontario that makes these photovoltaic panels here. And one of the reasons they're making it in Ontario is that in order to get the subsidy, you have to have Ontario content in the panels. So it's a way for Ontario to kickstart a new industry.